Hey guys, I'm Phil at Woods Tree Farm, and today we are going to assemble this wood chipper from Boss Industrial. They sent me this chipper free of charge in exchange for me making this assembly video for you. I have no experience in assembling wood chippers like this, so this is just a normal guy with normal tools assembling this 4-inch chipper. Here we go. Let's hope opening that crate was the hardest part. With everything laid out, the first thing I'll say is keep an eye out for any fasteners that may have become loose during shipment. I found two different bolts that need to get back in place. One of them goes on this piece here. And the other one goes in the back of this chipper housing over here. I do like that this is shipped with all of the hardware in place. So rather than you just getting a big bag full of hardware and you have to sort through it and figure out where everything goes, everything's already in place and just hand tight throughout the piece of equipment here. So you know where everything goes from the start. I'm going to start from the base and work my way up. So the first thing we have is this little foot pad that goes right here on the bottom. A washer and a lock washer on each one. I'm just going to try to get a couple pieces of wood under this to raise it up, because working by myself, this thing's quite heavy and it's challenging to get those holes to line up. There we go. All right, next on the other side, we can put on one of our axles. So next we're going to take the hardware off of the axles here and install our wheels. I notice my blocks aren't nearly tall enough at this moment, so I think I'm just going to try to lean this away from me to get this installed. And pay attention to where your valve stem is. You want it facing out so it's easy to add air in the future. These tires are actually directional. They have an arrow on there, but for a machine like this that isn't getting towed around, it probably doesn't really matter. Just make sure you have that air valve facing out. Because this is recessed, I'm going to need an extension on my ratchet. Repeat for the other side. I just went and got a bigger block, piece of firewood that I could hold the machine up with, so it'll be easy to install the tire. So next, on the discharge side of the machine, which is the smaller opening, we're going to remove the supplied hardware and the gasket that's there. It needs to remain in place in between the frame of the machine and the discharge chute. For something like this, I always make sure I thread in each one hand tight before I tighten any of them down, because there's a chance one of your holes might not line up, and if you tighten it down, you won't be able to move it. That's a 13mm fastener. Installing the in-feed chute is just like the discharge, except it's much bigger, and this part would be a lot easier with another set of hands, but I've got it lined up here. I can see my studs. Now I just need to add the hardware. Once I get these hand tight, it'll hold itself up. Little table here on the in-feed side, and it has 5 fasteners. There's a bar that needs to install right here. We just need to remove that cotter pin. All right, on mine where this bar comes in, I can't get these holes to line up no matter what I try. So I'm gonna take a little 3/16 drill bit here and see if I can just go in and clean up the hole. Much better. Just bend the bottom of the cotter pin to make sure those don't come out. So I just had to come back for a quick adjustment. You're going to want this in-feed table to be in line with or slightly above this bar. If you install it too low, this bar is going to be above it, and when you're feeding stuff in, you're going to be activating that safety switch. I don't think you really want to do that. So pull this, loosen the lower hardware on this tray, and then you can pull this up and tighten it in place there. The last step is find your little wiring harness here that comes off your engine, and there's 2 wires on the in-feed that need to get plugged in there. Well, I know you're anxious to use this, but there's one more step that you want to do before you fire this thing up and use it, and that's check the belt tension. To access it, we're going to remove the 4 bolts with a 10mm wrench or socket that hold it in place. I already loosened mine up. This housing comes out of the way and exposes your belt underneath. The instructions are actually on the outside of the housing, and I didn't notice this at first, and I actually went and ran the splitter and my belt started smoking. So you definitely want to do this. The sticker on the outside of the housing says you're going to push on the belt with about 10 pounds of force, and you don't want to see that belt deflect more than 3/8 of an inch. So to tighten your belt, you're actually going to loosen these 2 bolts that are on the pivot point, and you need to loosen all 4 motor mounts that are mounted underneath the motor where the motor mount meets the frame. And once all 4 motor mounts and these 2 are loose, then you can use these adjustment screws to change the tension on the drive belt. These tension screws have a lock nut in place, so we're just going to loosen that up, back it all the way off, and by tightening on these bolts, we're going to push the whole engine in that direction. And then once we got it where we want it, and you want to adjust both bolts evenly, so keep count of how many rotations you make. But once we got it where we want it, we can then put our lock nut back in place. And once everything is all tightened back down, make sure you retighten all of your engine mounts, retighten these pivot points, and then you can put the cover back on. We're going to put this thing to use. The final step is to check your manual and see which oil is appropriate for your climate. For most environments, 5W30 synthetic will do it. That's what I put in here today. It does not come with oil, so you will need to have that ready when you want to use it. So we're going to fire this thing up now and see how it works.